You're listening to Your Magical Midlife. This podcast is for women who are seekers, dreamers, and out-of-the-box thinkers. If you're a Gen X woman who never quite fit in, and probably never will, listen up. I'm Kate Higgins, your host. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and coach, and I'm here to guide you through the expansive, exhilarating, and sometimes exhausting crossroads that we find ourselves in at midlife. Whether you're a seasoned listener or just joining the adventure, think of this podcast as your hot pink convertible cruising down the highway of change. Together we'll navigate the sometimes baffling backroads of midlife and collect all the cool souvenirs along the way. Get in and buckle up. Our map may have flown out the window miles ago, but that doesn't mean we aren't going to have a blast. Let's hit the road and discover the magic just around the bend. Rosebud Woman was developed in response to women's unaddressed needs for beautiful, luxurious products that provide relief and pleasure, whether it be for period pain, pregnancy, perimenopausal woes, or menopause symptoms. Intimate wellness products are often designed to use with a sexual partner or medicalized to treat a diagnosed issue. Rosebud Woman feels different. It feels ceremonial, like I'm doing a beauty ritual while addressing my 50-plus-year-old body's needs. Their everyday honor balm is gynecology tested and hormone-free. It hydrates, conditions, and replenishes intimate skin. It is excellent for all phases of a woman's life. Go below to my show notes and use the affiliate link for 20% off. Wendy Perrotti is a master's level certified professional coach, speaker, and leadership trainer with over 25 years of experience helping women at midlife to effect positive change in their lives. She's the co-founder of Camp Reinvention, a transformative, one-of-a-kind program for women 50-plus who are looking to reboot, reignite, and reinvent their lives. Wendy's podcast, A Glimpse Inside, Moving People from Stuck to Happy, was downloaded over 2 million times. She's a sought-after speaker and the author of the forthcoming book, Reclaiming Muchness, and I'm so thrilled to have her on today's episode. Hey, Wendy, I so appreciate you coming on to talk about coaching for women in midlife, women 50 plus, and specifically about Camp Reinvention, which I am so excited to tell my audience about. So, Wendy, tell everyone who isn't familiar with your work a little bit about you and what you do.
I'm excited to be here with you, Kate. I have been a coach for really as long as before people knew what coaching was. Let's put it that way. When I became a coach, people would say to me, "You're what? Do you coach basketball?" I think now coaching is a really common thing, but when I started, it wasn't. So I've been coaching for a really long time. I started in leadership development coaching. And as you do, right, you gravitate toward the work that, at least in like a perfect world, right, we gravitate to the work that's the most meaningful to us. I gravitated to working with women. And then I I was in my 40s at first. I started working with women more and more that were sort of like me in their 40s, managing the kids and the career and all of those things. And as I got older, so did my audience. And so I started working really exclusively with women over 50. And for a long time now, I've been working with women in their 50s, 60s, 70s, even 80s, who find that after those decades of like build, where we're building a life, we want our life to be more about the way we experience it. And so those are the people that I tend to work with. And along that process, I met Dana Hilmer, who is the co-founder of Camp Reinvention. She found herself down sort of a similar path and was really reaching into working less with leadership and more with women in that space as well. And we had coffee together one day and said, wouldn't it be cool if we took this the magic of one-on-one coaching where you're really bringing people through a dynamic process, but it's very individualized. Wouldn't it be cool if we could take that process and deliver it to lots of women, deliver it in groups? And that's where Camp Reinvention was born.
That's amazing. I think almost every good thing in life starts with, wouldn't it be cool if?
It's so true.
Right.
So true. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I think that's why I'm here. Like we ran into each other at an event and we started talking and you said, wouldn't it be cool if you came on my podcast?
Yes. And here you are.
And here I am.
So what year approximately did you start coaching? In the 90s or the early 2000s or?
I started in the early 2000s.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. When coaching was the baby industry.
It was a baby industry. You know, like I said, my kids would constantly say, what is it that you do? Because I had a home office up in the third floor and one side of my house, and kids would be playing on the other side of my house. And what is your mother doing up there? What does she do? Yeah, people hadn't heard of it yet. And now I think it's like a common term. It's a common profession in the marketplace.
Yeah, it is. It is an interesting profession to go into. As somebody who is transitioning into it myself, I think there's still a lot of people who aren't really clear how a coach can help them.
Yeah.
So what do you think most women in their 50s come to you with? Like, what is the solve that they're looking for? Are there common themes?
There are common themes, and everyone comes to coaching with a solve, right? Everyone comes to coaching and says, I cannot lose weight because I'm inconsistent. Or they come to coaching and say, I just got laid off and I don't know what to do. I've been in the same industry for a million years and the industry is half dead. Or I'm about to retire and I don't know what's next for me. Or I need to keep earning money and I don't know if I'm relevant anymore, but my bank account says I need to be. Or I'm having a relationship issue, or there's grief or loss. So everyone comes to coaching for a specific solve. Those are the moments that we realize that the ground under our feet isn't as stable as we thought it was.
Right.
What people end up getting out of coaching, of course, is the solution, but that ends up being more almost a symptom of the coaching rather than the end result of the coaching. It's building that new foundation under your feet based on who you are and how you want to experience your world that allows you to solve for those things in new ways.
Right. I feel like midlife is such a reckoning/reawakening for many women. I know it was for me. I felt like when I got to 40, I couldn't believe I was 40. And I have lived a very unconventional life. And I felt like, oh my God, I've been asleep at the wheel and I don't have the things that I had hoped to have. And even though my life isn't a common thing. Like I had my social work career and I had my side gigs, multiple, and I didn't get married and I didn't have children. I still felt when I got to 40 that I had built something that I wasn't sure fit me anymore. And I don't know why. This is just what everyone goes through. I don't know if it's the human condition. I don't know if it's that. I don't know. Can you speak to that? Do you think that everybody gets to the crossroads and they're like, even if they have everything they want, they wonder if it's enough or they wonder if it's what they wanted?
I won't say everyone, right? But I will say that most people do. And I've been talking a lot about this with my daughter, who's 22 years old. Looking at the world through her lens, through the upheaval of being in your 20s, through the joy of being in your 20s, and then seeing it through my current lens, and then sort of remembering back to my lens when I was in my 20s. There's such a lack of not just formal education, but even cultural education in our families, in our communities about how we want to experience life, about learning to be who you essentially are and be okay with it and navigate society from that place. So without that as our foundation, of course we all go through this crossroads because we're building based on on shoulds or expectations. We're adopting rules, we're adopting goals that we think are the best ones or we think are the right ones without ever having taken the time or having the understanding really to be able to explore why it may or may not be right for us.
Right. Maybe you could speak to a little bit to this. What was your upbringing like? Did you have did you had the kind of parents that were like, you're going to be a dentist, or you're going to be a teacher, or you're going to be a wife, or you're going to be a mother? I mean, I had classic 70s parents that gave me very limited information about what was available to me. And they were like, go get married and buy a house with a fence around it. And that's success.
I think that the classic 70s parents, my parents didn't check my homework or say, you're going to be this or you're going to be that. There were expectations. And I think that our generation, Kate, we thought that we were learning how to be empowered, individual, educated, career-oriented, family-oriented women, because those were the messages, right? On the commercials, on the television, those were the new women. But if you go back and look at that, I just showed my daughter an episode of All in the Family where Gloria was supposed to be like the young, hated woman. And she didn't go to a rally because she had to make Michael his sandwich and type his paper for college. He went to picket and he went to the demonstration, but she stayed home to type his paper. So I don't think we understood how still steeped in traditional norms of being a woman that Gen X generation was. And in a way, I think it kind of confused us because on the one hand, all the language was, you're going to bring home the bacon and fry it up in a pan and you're going to be a mom and you're going to do, going to do all this. And we're seeing, though, that women still looked very much the way that they used to. So I had that too. And then, Italian Catholic girl with all of the goodies and not so goodies that come with it.
Right. Did you grow up in the Northeast? Or where'd you grow up?
I did. I grew up in Connecticut.
Okay. So you had that traditional get married, be a good girl.
Be a good
follow
girl.
the rules.
Yes. Make sure everybody likes you. Like one of the number one things that I learned from my mother was, do they like you? If someone didn't like me, and believe me, God bless my mother, she's a good girl. Like there's not a mean bone in her body. She wasn't trying to, but her answer to someone not liking me as a young kid was, let's throw them a party. We'll throw them a party and then maybe they'll like you then.
Wow.
Right? So it wasn't, nobody's everybody's cup of tea. Move on. Who cares if they don't like you? Not everybody's going to like you. It was, let's do something extraordinary and get them to like you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. My mother
just gives me a little bit.
My mother's response was like, well, what's wrong with you? They don't like you? Well, I mean, clearly.
What you do? What you do? For sure.
Yeah. My mother's like, well, it's because you're fat.
Oh, well, my mother told me, thank God you're fat, because this is the way my mother would tell me how perfect and wonderful I was. She would say, thank God you're fat, because if not, you'd be so perfect, nobody'd be able to stand you. And she did her best, but
they didn't know.
Really? They didn't know.
They had depression era parents. I'm realizing that now that my mother is gone and I have my dad, and my dad is so sick he can barely have a conversation. And I look back at my childhood, and I'm sure you do this too, and you think of like the flawed parenting we received. I remember that they didn't have those television parents either.
No.
They had depression era parents.
And I can tell you, Kate, I do have children. I have two children who are currently in their 20s. And I worked hard to be a very intentional parent. And of course, my goal was to do it right and to do the best thing for my kids. And I'm not saying that I'm not a good mom and that I don't have good relationships with my kids. I do. I'm so grateful to have that. But oh my God, I messed them up. There are plenty of things that I did that I watch those kids and I think, oh my God, I did that to them. I'm the one who gave them because there's no such thing as getting it right. That's not life.
No. I think you can apply that to everything. There's no right way to have a life. There's no right way to have a career. There's no right way to have a family. There's no right way. But we grew up in the era of and we grew up in traditional families. So there was always a right way according to our families. How did your traditional Italian Catholic family, how did they conceptualize what you are doing with yourself, professionally? Do they understand it?
So yeah, at this stage of the game, they totally get it. And
But 20 years ago?
20 years ago, less so. I think that my mother was an entrepreneur, so that sort of changed. She was a florist, but she built quite a good business as a florist. And so I think that the entrepreneurial thing was not shocking in my family or household. But there's something about that traditional culture there's a lot of fear. And like, if you love someone, your degree of terror and suffering for them is equal to your love for them, which is so messed up. But so I think that they were so fearful of me failing, so fearful of that. And I think that even our friends do that to us. Like we do that to the people that we love, like our fear, even when we're trying to support someone, can end up undermining them.
Right. Because we can't tolerate watching somebody else struggle.
Right.
Right.
Or even grow.
Yeah.
Right. How many times do you have someone as your cheerleader to get the new job, or in my life, lose weight? And then the first thing out of their mouth, you're too skinny. Well, no, I'm not. I'm still 10 pounds heavier than anybody in this room, but I'm too skinny because the way I look is unfamiliar to you. And physiologically, we're wired to dislike unfamiliar. So even our biggest cheerleaders who are behind us and say, you can do it, make the change. As we start to change, their whole physiology tries to pull us back into a more recognizable version of ourselves.
Right.
And so, and we often, because we want to be in a more recognizable, it's uncomfortable to transition.
Right.
Right.
And we don't want anyone to worry. We don't want to upset anybody. We don't want to upset the dynamic. We don't want to upset the hierarchy. We don't want to upset the way things always have been. It's hard to go out of your comfort zone in any way at all.
It's hard. And, and I look at women have different sort of reflexes to that. Some have the reflex of the good girl. Okay, I'll dial it down. I'll make it more comfortable for you. I'll make it more. Some have that sort of ostrich. I'm just gonna la 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 la. I'll keep doing what I'm doing, and maybe nobody will notice. And I just kind of withdraw and get more quiet and small until I come out of the other side of this. And then there are the people who come in like a tiger and push so hard against that they're creating unnecessary conflict for themselves as a protection from that. So, all of those things are natural responses to change.
Right.
It's that no one ever told them. No one prepared us, which is why I think coaching as a profession is exploding because anyone who's experienced it says, oh my God, how did I not know this? How have I not looked at my life through this lens before? Everything makes sense. Everything becomes easier.
Right.
Or more simple, maybe not easier.
So you became a coach and you were in your early 30s?
40, like early 40s.
Early 40s. Okay. And how did you become like a leadership coach? Was that for like big corporations?
So honestly, it was easier. It was easier because if you're starting to do something that what I always wanted to do was the work I do now, which is one-on-one coaching.
Right.
But it's hard to make a name for yourself. And it's hard, especially in a digital world that was just becoming a digital world. And, it was either do something online or go give talks for free at the Olive Garden. Well, how do you build a business like that especially when nobody's even heard of what you're doing?
Right.
So leadership was so much easier because there was you would call a company and say, I've got a program, and you'd go in and deliver a program, and then coaching was sort of a part of the back end of those programs. So it was easy because you knew who you were selling to. You could actually go out and sell a product. And then as I built a reputation for myself as a one-on-one coach, I just let that go because it wasn't the work I was passionate about.
Right. Because when you discover that women in midlife really need a lot of support because it's so destabilizing in so many ways.
Yeah.
There's the shift in your identity, there's the shift in your body, there's the shift in the dynamic between you and your parent, where the role reverses. If you have kids, your kids are getting ready to launch. It's a lot.
And those dynamics change. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's a major transitional period. And we go through others, right? We've all been through puberty. That was wrong. We go through many life transitions. What makes the midlife transition, I think, complex is that we have more responsibility at that stage of the game. We certainly have more patterns, right? So we've got decades of patterns that are running underneath our radar that are really running the show of how we show up and the choices we make. So much of it is on default at the stage of the game. And breaking those patterns isn't easy. It makes us uncomfortable. And I think that there's also an element of urgency. This transition, I know so many women who come to the table for coaching come in and say, I have to get this right. I don't have the time to get it wrong. I don't have the time to make a mistake here. I need this to be right. And again, nobody gave us the foundation of knowing there is no right. Like, you can't get it right. So you have to move through the level of how do I want to experience this is the way to figure it out.
Right. And I think also what I learned when I met you at Quest, looking around that room, a false belief I had that I'd love you to speak to is this false concept that there is if you like, you have until like, I don't know, 55 or 60 to get it right. And then you're screwed. Like, that's it. Like, you hit a certain age and then I used to think that age was 40. Older, I realized that, okay, so maybe physically there are things I can't do. Like, I'm not going to be able to be a prima ballerina at 53 and dance with the New York City Ballet or anything like that. But I'm not as out of time with things as I thought I was. I think we took a timeline, right? Do you see that a lot with the women you work with, that they think like, oh no, like I'm going to turn to dust on my 50th birthday and blow away in the wind?
I do. And that number is a really personal number. For some people, it's 40, and for some people, it's 50, and for some people, it's 70. And not only is it personal, but it's just like any of the other glass ceilings. So While it is true, Kate, I live in the real world, and like you, I see we've we've come to understand how things work in the world by this stage of the game. We've come to understand what's possible, what's no longer possible at this stage of the game. And yet, truly, things that appear to be truly miraculous do happen. And I believe that those happen when it is yours. So when I say yours, I mean, I want to be an astronaut. Well, I think guess what, when the ship has so sailed, and maybe for you that was never happening. So maybe I'll never be an astronaut. Although now there's all these opportunities, right? Where perhaps in the private sector you could go to space. But should that be the thing that is burning in my soul? I would say it is likely that in one way or another, something about space will be mine in my lifetime if I come to clarity about it and understand my own level of choice. And I'm going to give you an example of this. What made me think of this is your example of a prima ballerina. When I was training as a coach, one of the women in my coaching program, absolutely stunning woman. I'm 5'4". You've met me in person. This woman, I think she was over 6 feet and had the look and physique of like Serena Williams. Like just a beautiful, statured, but muscular woman, tall woman. And sometime after that, and she was in her early 30s at that time, sometime after that, he said, I want to be a ballerina. Now, she's in her 30s, she's 6 feet tall. Not a big, not overweight in any way, but like I said, muscular girl. Nothing about this woman looked like a ballerina.
Right.
Nothing about her looked like a ballerina. And she had never danced.
Wow. Okay.
I want to be a ballerina. So you're not going to dance, as you said, with the New York Ballet, right? At this stage of the game, that ship has sailed for you, and maybe it was never yours. But this dance, this ballerina thing was in this woman's soul. And she was a solopreneur. She had a million little side gigs going. It was hard for her to pay the bills. She went to Home Depot, bought those white pipes. I don't know what the hell they're called, but made her own bar and she begged a ballerina teacher in her town to let her take classes with 4-year-olds. Okay, she took classes with 4-year-olds and she practiced and she practiced and she practiced and she practiced. And I don't remember the exact timeline, but I'm going to tell you that within 5 years, maybe it was 6 years of that, this past Christmas, she danced in a lead role in the Nutcracker with the Connecticut Ballet.
That's amazing.
So these things that our patterning and our experience tells us that is no longer possible for me, probably, unless it is yours.
Right.
And then if it's yours, pursue it, because even if it doesn't look the way your fantasy of it looks, some version of it will come true for you.
Right. If it's your passion, you have to be maybe creative with the imagining of it. Right.
Again, it's less about the attachment to the specific outcome than it to how do I want to experience my life. I want to experience my life as a ballerina.
Right.
As much of that in my life as I could get. And I'm not pushing. She may have pushed herself, but She wasn't pushing herself to be other than what she was.
Right. And I'm sure she
Right.
got so much joy out of dancing that part.
Of every bit of it, because it was hers, I guess is the only way I can describe it. It's the way I feel about this work that I do. It's what I see in you when you talk to me about why you're moving into a solopreneur, your private practice and into coaching, because there's an inner passion there.
Right. So that's what you guys do at Camp Reinvention is you help women find their inner passion.
Right. And clear away some of that patterning that stops us from being able to see it.
Right. Talk about Camp Reinvention, the structure of it, what it does for people, for women, who it's for, who's the ideal person for Camp Reinvention.
So the ideal person for Camp Reinvention is a woman over 50-ish. We've had women who come in who are like really in that transition. They're 48, they're 49. And I can't tell you how many women who reach out and say, I am well into my 70s. Is this not the group for me? And they come and hell yes, it's the group for them. So I think we even had 2 women in their 80s in this program. So it's just, if you are a woman in midlife or that stage past midlife, and you're saying, I want to experience my life more fully. Even if there's one of those goals at the front of it, I want to lose weight. I want to get over this grief. I want to make this transition into a new career. I want to retire. There's almost always a goal at the front of it. But the driver is, and whatever I do with that, I want to experience my life fully. I want the last breath of my life to say, that was a life well lived. Right? That is the ideal person for Camp Reinvention. And it's a 12-week program. Each week we have a module where we're taking you through sort of a 4-pillar process, where initially pillar 1 we call reset. And that's that operating system. That's where we're looking at what is your patterning for all of these decades that's driving you under the radar. What does it look like? How much of that patterning is really serving you? Because some of it is going to. Some of that autopilot is going to help you sail through your transition. And some of it has you shackled to the past. So that first pillar during those weeks of reset, we're really looking at what is your patterning like? And how do we help you really dial in to the parts of it that are serving you moving forward and release? Put down the parts of it that you're done with. They serve you no longer. And the second pillar, we call that rewind. And we're still sort of looking backward. Only now we're looking at your experience of life up until this point. And that's kind of what we were talking about with that, well, what's possible and what's not possible for me. You've got decades of things that tell you this is the way it is. These are we learn from experience, right? But if you put your hand on a hot stove, ouch, that hurts, not doing that again. That's learning from experience. But most of the things that you've learned from experience, Kate, over the decade, so much more complex than that.
Right.
Any slight shift, anything different in circumstances would have produced a slightly or vastly different outcome. So all of these things that we think we know for sure about the way the world works, it's only one version of it. So in this second pillar, we're really looking at untying that Gordian knot of our own experiences to look through the lens of possibility and wisdom rather than trying to shove it all into the box of what we think we know for sure. In pillar 4, we call that reboot. And here's where we're like getting right face to face with current reality, right? We might be really inspired to make this big leap, but maybe we are caring for a dad with dementia, or maybe we have limited financial resources or are struggling through a health challenge, or really taking a look at what is my current reality? It doesn't have to alter, and usually doesn't alter, your goals or dreams or where you're moving toward, what you're moving toward, but it does alter the approach that you choose. Because if your approach is not in alignment with where you are right now and what matters to you about where you are right now, you're destined to go back to the old pattern.
Right.
So pillar number 3, that's it, current reality. And that's where we start to set goals. Like, we don't even talk about what are your goals, what do you want until then. And then in the final pillar, which we call re-engage, that's where we're looking at, okay, you've got some goals, and we've got a really interesting way of achieving goals, very different than sort of the way we were learned with all of those SMART goals, really detailed 5-year plans and all of that stuff. We really have a simplified version of moving toward goals. And then in the final pillar of Camp Reinvention, re-engage, we look at the things, okay, you've got your compass, you're headed toward the horizon. What might turn the ship around? What are the things where life happens, quote unquote, that might derail you? And we run through all of those in that final pillar so that you've got a toolbox that helps to keep you on track.
Right. That's amazing. Is it a totally digital program? Is it all on Zoom?
It is a totally digital program.
So it's accessible from anywhere in the world, wherever you are.
You can do it yourself. You can do it in 12 weeks. You can take 12 years to do it. Once someone gets Camp Reinvention, has our program, you have lifetime access to it. Because even though we take you through a process, each piece of that process isn't going to resonate for every person in every moment. So you're going to pull the things that are working for you and create sort of your build and your shift based on that. But then as you grow and as you move through life, more of those elements are going to now become relevant. So you can go back and revisit them and say, okay, now I'm ready for this.
Right. Right. That's awesome. Is there an in-person component to it at all?
There is, although I'm not sure that we're going to run that this year. So I think we might be digital only this year. Yeah.
Okay. But sometimes you do have like gatherings or retreats or.
Yes. Okay. Yep, we do. We have Camp Live. Sometimes we run the 12-week program. Often we've run the 12-week program with a live component where we deliver the module live every week. But right now it's digital.
Why is it called Camp Reinvention?
So we got into a conversation, Dana Hilmer and I got into a conversation about, wouldn't it be cool if we create this process? And we started talking about the different ways that we coach and what matters to us and what really makes the shift for people. And we started sort of conceptualizing this process. And as people do when they're in their passion spot, and I think as women do, because we've kind of needed to learn to, we start to get really serious about it. We started taking it all very seriously and becoming, and I don't remember which one of us was like, you know what? It'd be fun. Like we forgot to have fun as women. I think too many women have forgotten to stop and have fun. And so we thought, let's call it camp. Let's take a much lighter approach to this. Let's look through the lens of joy and pleasure and fun and presence and experience. And so that's why. And the very first one actually was, we held it in a place called Mohonk Mountain House, upstate New York. Have you been?
I have not been. I have admired it online many
times. Cool.
Oh,
so cool. And that's the very camp-like vibe. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a gorgeous place. So did you have your own midlife struggle, or because you're a coach, like you managed to bypass all of that?
Nobody bypasses it, Kate. I know you know that. None of us bypass it. None of us bypass it. There's no finish line. I think if we had the Dalai Lama sitting here with us on this, He would tell you about all of the struggles in the transitions in his life and the ones that he continues to face. That is what a life of growth looks like.
Yeah.
That's life without stagnation looks like. We reach a point that feels like, ouch, and then we either stay stuck there or we grow through it.
Mm. What's been your biggest lesson as you've worked as an entrepreneur doing this work with women? What's been your biggest takeaway for yourself?
My biggest takeaway for myself. Let me think about this for a second. Things that come to mind. I know that finding the right kind of boundaries,
Mm.
maybe that is the biggest takeaway for myself. That's another thing that I think is poorly taught, both in formal education and even currently in a lot of leadership development and personal development. Most of the way we've learned to create boundaries is about putting up a barrier, is about protecting ourselves and barriering ourselves. I don't think that's a word. And when we do that, we close down a part, and a very essential part of ourselves. We're boundarying our heart. It's kind of like we're armoring up in some way. And I think that to be able to learn how to have strong boundaries for myself without barriers in an open-hearted way, in a way that says that where a boundary is more of an invitation to deeper intimacy, whether I'm talking about my personal relationship or professional relationship, it means we know each other better now because of this and can operate in a more successful way together because of this. I think learning that level of boundary, probably the biggest takeaway for me personally.
Yeah. I think boundaries, especially for women, are hard because we're not taught them, right? We're taught to be people pleasers. We're taught to always say yes. We're taught to accommodate and to be nice. And boundaries and nice don't always go hand in hand.
No, they don't. And then I think what happened is that as women came up into more powerful position, they started saying enough, enough, that whole talk to the hand thing.
Right.
No, I'm
Right.
protecting myself. No means no.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
useful, absolutely useful, because now we are not at the mercy of, but now we're creating barriers to often the very things that we want. And so to learn to boundary in a way that is about behaviors, not about people, instead of saying you are this or you off or you,
Right.
do not speak to me that way.
Yeah. Boundaries.
Right? Not speak to me that way. The boundary.
Yeah. Creating a boundary without creating a barrier.
Right
That's
on.
a good lesson. Oh my God. I wish someone had taught me that when I was 35 because I had two speeds, doormat or, jumping out of my car with a baseball bat.
Yes. Yeah.
Island, what can I say? So I'm going to jump into our little speed round, which I'm going to ask you questions I ask everybody. And I'll put all your info in the show notes because I want everyone to be able to find you and find Camp Reinvention. And it's such a amazing program and so many women would benefit for it. I think it's the only program of its kind.
It is the only program of its kind. Yes.
That's amazing. That must feel really, really good.
It does. We're insanely proud of it.
You should be insanely proud of it because it's probably what every woman in midlife should do for herself.
Yeah. And I will say, Kate, it works. Like we have put hundreds of women through Camp Reinvention and we continuously stream a 5-star reviews.
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So my speed round questions are very silly, but they're fun. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
And how do you take your coffee?
Black.
And do you have a snack that you like to have with your coffee?
No, I'm not a coffee snacker.
Okay. Are you a snacker in general?
If I had my snack of choice, always popcorn made in a pot with olive oil.
Ooh, old school. I love it. I miss popcorn like that.
Yeah.
What is your theme song for this stage of your life?
Ah, what is my theme song for this stage of my life? I don't know if I thought about that.
Do you have something you like to listen to in the car when you're driving around?
Well, my children are musicians, so I listen to them. My daughter is less formally a musician. She's a vocalist, but from passion, but she studies other things. My son is a musician, so mostly I listen to I listen to my son. And actually, you know what? He's just released a new song called "We'll Meet Again," and there's a lot of cool things in that song that I love.
That's awesome. I can tell how proud you are.
Yeah.
And by just the look on your face and your voice, he must be really, really good. And you're raised a good son.
He's really good, and he followed a passion against the odds.
Yeah, that's brave.
Yeah.
It's brave to do that. What is your superpower?
Oh, definitely listening. I hear things. I hear people really well, and that allows me to synthesize information in a way that they've not seen themselves or ever had reflected back to them. Definitely, that's my superpower.
Fabulous. So people can work with you individually or they can sign up with Camp Reinvention, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So you have an individual website, which I'll link in the show notes, and you have Camp Reinvention, which I'll also link in the show notes. And I'm also going to link podcast.
Yeah, I had a podcast several years ago. I had a podcast called A Glimpse Inside, Moving People from Stuck to Happy. It was on the Superpower Experts Network, and it was a really fun project. It did really well.
Fabulous. I really appreciate you coming on. I'm so grateful that I met you at Quest. Will I see you at Quest next year?
Yes, I loved it. I loved it. It was a great time. I will absolutely be there.
It was a wonderful experience. I'm so thankful for you. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thankful for you too, Kate. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to Your Magical Midlife. I'm Kate Higgins, your host. You can follow me on Instagram at Your Magical Midlife. You can also check out my offerings on my website, which is www.yourmagicalmidlife.com. I offer individualized coaching for women 45 plus who are seekers, dreamers, and out-of-box thinkers. I also offer luxury retreats that include ritual, rites of passage, and ceremony for women 45 and beyond. I'd be so excited to work with you. Also, if you're feeling kind and you've enjoyed this episode, please leave me a 5-star review as it opens this podcast to a broader audience and keeps me in those pesky algorithms. Thank you so much for your partnership with me. I appreciate you. Have a great week.